I can still hear the sound my inbox made that afternoon. A harmless little ping, the kind you hear dozens of times a day until it dissolves into background noise. That one, though, was different. It was the sound of the ground shifting under my feet. At first, I did not even notice. I was deep in another reconciliation report, the kind that required my full attention and left my eyes sore from scanning endless rows of numbers. I told myself I would check the new email later, but habit is stronger than resolve. Without thinking, I clicked it open. A spreadsheet, attached from HR. I thought it was a mistake, another mind-numbing report on benefit allocations or enrollment summaries, the kind that usually arrived with no explanation and no urgency. But when I opened the file, my stomach dropped. Names, salaries, bonuses, all laid out row by row. I blinked. Once. Twice. My brain refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. The numbers had to be wrong. They had to be placeholders or some old draft that never should have been circulated. I refreshed the file. Again, still the same. Then I began reading. Mason Reeves, 2 years at the company, $137,000. Vanessa Lynn, 14 months, $134,500. Tristan Adler, 8 months, $142,000. And then me, Eloise Warren. 9 years, $98,750. I froze. For a moment I forgot to breathe. 9 years. Nearly a decade of my life poured into this company. 9 years of late nights, of weekends sacrificed, of emergencies handled before anyone else even knew there was a problem. 9 years of building their entire financial architecture from scratch, of fixing what no one else could fix, of saving the millions they never would have noticed slipping away. And I was worth less than every person I had trained. My pulse thudded in my ears. The office around me dimmed, voices melting into an indistinct hum. The clicking of keyboards, the murmur of conversations, even the too-cold blast of the ventilation system, all of it faded until there was only me and the glaring truth on the screen. Across the aisle, Mason laughed loudly at his monitor, shoulders shaking, his chair tilted dangerously back. He still asked me the simplest questions about accounts payable even after 2 years, and yet he was paid nearly $40,000 more than me. Something broke inside me. 3 minutes later, the recall email appeared. Kyle from HR had realized his mistake. Too late. I had already downloaded the file and saved it to my personal drive. Evidence. Proof. My hands moved before my mind caught up. I snapped my laptop shut, stood, and walked. Each step toward the corner office felt like walking into fire, but I did not stop. Daniel Hammond, my manager for 6 years, his door was half open. I knocked once, twice, then stepped inside. "Eloise," he said, looking up with a frown. "Something urgent?" I set my laptop on his desk and flipped it open to the spreadsheet. My voice came out flat, controlled. "I need to understand this." His eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. A tiny widening of his pupils betrayed what his expression tried to hide. He knew exactly what I had found. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, adopting that managerial pose designed to project calm authority. "Eloise, you know I cannot discuss other employees' compensation." "I am not asking about theirs," I said. My throat was tight, but my words were steady. "I am asking about mine. 9 years, $98,750. "How is it possible," I continued, "that people with a year or less at this company earn nearly 40% more than I do after everything I have built here?" He sighed. That sigh, I had heard it too many times. The one meant to make me feel small, unreasonable, inconvenient. "The market has changed significantly since you were hired," he said. "Compensation for new entrants reflects that. Your salary was set in a different economy." "Then adjust it," I said. "It is not that simple," he replied. "There are bands, structures, policies. This is how the company operates." He shrugged. He actually shrugged. "Take it or leave it." My hands trembled, but it was not fear, it was anger. A sharp, clean anger that cut through the numbness. "I would like to request a formal compensation review," I said. "You can submit the request," he said, already glancing at his watch. "But it will be denied. We just completed reviews last quarter." "You received your standard 3% increase. Is there anything else? Was there anything else?" After 9 years, that was what I got. I walked out before I said something I could not take back. My legs felt brittle, but my steps were steady. Back at my desk, I stared at the spreadsheet one more time. My name, my salary, the cold proof of how little they valued me. That night I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not call my sister, though she would have listened. Instead, I poured myself a glass of cheap red wine, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. If they would not calculate my worth, I would do it myself. I started with a timeline. 2014, hired as a financial analyst. Built the first automated reporting system, saving 30 hours of manual work every week. 2015, promoted to senior analyst. Restructured accounts receivable, reducing outstanding collections by 42%. 2016. Created a tax compliance framework that passed federal audit with 0 findings. The first clean audit in company history. On and on it went. Every crisis averted, every dollar saved, every system built. Every single contribution that had been brushed aside, invisible until now. Hours passed. The wineglass emptied, then refilled. My apartment was silent except for the relentless tapping of keys. I was not just writing a report. I was constructing a mirror they could not ignore. By dawn, I had 43 pages. I titled it The Cost of Institutional Memory. On the final page, I calculated it plainly, $267,459 saved for the company in the last year alone. Compared against the $39,500 it would have cost to bring my salary up to market rate. The math was not complicated. The truth never is. When I finally stopped, the sky outside had lightened to gray. My eyes burned, my hands ached, but I felt a clarity I had never known before. This was no longer about asking. It was about deciding. I printed the document, had it bound at the 24-hour copy shop down the street, and laid it carefully on my kitchen table beside my resignation letter. The decision was made. Tomorrow, they would see me differently. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet longer than usual. Clothes hung in neat lines, color-coded from pale to dark, the kind of order that made sense when so much else didn't. My hand drifted to the charcoal pencil skirt and cream blouse I had bought 3 years ago, a gift to myself after my last promotion. It was the most expensive outfit I owned, one I had saved for presentations that mattered. Today mattered. I dressed carefully, pinned my hair back, and for the first time in months applied lipstick. My reflection looked unfamiliar, sharper somehow, like a version of myself I had almost forgotten. When I arrived at the office, the building felt different. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the weight of the bound report in my bag, its presence solid and undeniable. I walked past rows of desks, past whispers I could feel more than hear. The spreadsheet had spread. People knew. Eyes followed me as I crossed the floor. I did not stop. At 7:15 a.m., the CEO's office was still empty. His assistant hadn't arrived yet. I slipped inside, placed 3 items neatly at the center of his desk, the leather-bound report, my resignation letter, and the offer letter from the competing firm that had been courting me for months. Then I left. By 9:30, my phone rang. "Eloise, could you come to my office, please?" Garrett Wilson's voice carried an edge of tightness I had never heard before. I gathered my notebook, my pen, and walked deliberately across the office floor. The whispers grew louder, curiosity hanging thick in the air. People pretended not to watch, but their eyes followed me all the same. Inside the office, Garrett was not alone. Daniel sat stiffly beside him, Kyle from HR looked pale, and Vanessa Chen, the COO, had her arms crossed tightly over her chest. My report lay open on the desk, its pages spread like evidence. "Close the door, please," Garrett said. His tone was calm, but his jaw was tight. I stayed standing, even when he gestured toward a chair. "We've reviewed your document," he began, tapping the cover with a measured hand. "I have to say, it is thorough." "Thank you," I said, my voice neutral. "There seems to be a misunderstanding about compensation that we should address," Kyle interjected quickly, sweat already shining at his hairline. "There is no misunderstanding," I replied. "I have been here 9 years. I have trained people who now earn significantly more than I do." When I raised the issue, I was dismissed. I am simply making a business decision based on the facts. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Eloise, if you had given us time—" "I did," I cut in. 9 years of time. I turned my gaze to Garrett. "The final section of my report includes a knowledge transfer plan. Every process, every system, every vulnerability that exists only in my head. Organized, detailed. You will find it useful when I leave." Vanessa leaned forward, studying me with sharp eyes. "You have clearly put significant thought into this, Eloise." "I have." Garrett's voice dropped. "What would it take for you to reconsider your resignation?" I had anticipated this. "My market value is established by both your own compensation structures and the offer I have already received. But this is not just about money. It is about 9 years of being undervalued despite measurable contributions." To stay, I would require my salary adjusted to $150,000, retroactive compensation for the past year's disparity as a bonus, and a formal review of compensation practices across the company. Kyle gasped. Daniel stared at his shoes. Garrett studied me for a long, silent moment. You realize what you are asking is highly unusual. So is building your financial infrastructure at a 40% discount for nearly a decade, I said. The silence stretched. Outside the glass walls, I saw heads tilt, eyes darting. The office knew something was unfolding. Finally, Garrett said, "Give us 24 hours to prepare a response." "My resignation is effective in 2 weeks," I said. "The knowledge transfer plan requires 60 days. You have 24 hours to decide whether that gap is worth closing." I turned to leave. At the door, Vanessa spoke again. "Eloise, just out of curiosity, who made you the competing offer?" I paused. "Horizon Financial Solutions," I said evenly. "Led by Catherine Walsh." The name dropped into the room like a stone into water. Catherine Walsh, the woman who had famously left this very company years ago after enduring the same treatment I had, the woman who had since built a competitor that had been stealing our clients one by one. The look on their faces told me they understood exactly what they were about to lose. I walked back to my desk, heart pounding, but steps steady. For the first time in 9 years, I felt the shift of power tilting in my direction. At my desk, my phone lit with a message. "Catherine, did you do it?" I typed back a single word. "Yes," her reply was instant. "Their loss, our gain. Dinner tonight?" I smiled faintly and set the phone down. The victory was not final, but it was real. And it was only the beginning. What I had not told them, what I had not included in my report, was the secret that gave me real leverage. 18 months ago, I had noticed a small irregularity. A payment to a vendor that did not match any approved purchase order. $13,875, small enough to ignore. I flagged it to Daniel, who dismissed it as pre-approved. The same happened with the next one, and the next. After the third dismissal, I started keeping my own log. Quarter by quarter, the payments repeated. Different vendors, different names, but the same pattern. Small enough to slip under thresholds, steady enough to blend into growing revenue. By month 6, the truth was clear. Someone was siphoning funds through fake accounts. $2.7 million in 3 years, and I was the only one who knew. I minimized the file and took a slow breath. The day had only just begun. The office seemed louder when I returned to my desk, though no one was speaking directly to me. Whispers carried like smoke through the open-plan space, curling into every corner, impossible to trace. People pretended to work, eyes glued to screens, but I could feel them. The spreadsheet had slipped out of the shadows and into rumor. They knew, or at least suspected, that I had confronted leadership. I typed mechanically, finishing a budget report that suddenly felt meaningless. Numbers blurred together. Every keystroke echoed like a countdown. A colleague passed by my desk, too casually, her glance lingering a fraction of a second too long. Another cleared his throat like he was about to say something, then thought better of it. I could almost hear the unspoken questions. What did she see? What did she say? What will happen now? I did not answer any of them. By mid-afternoon, the tension was suffocating. Daniel avoided my gaze when he walked past. Kyle from HR disappeared behind closed doors. Garrett's blinds stayed drawn. Vanessa crossed the floor once, her eyes cool, assessing, as if calculating what kind of threat I might become. When 5 o'clock came, I packed my bag slowly, deliberately, while others stole glances. The silence around me was sharper than any question. I walked out without a word. Outside, the evening air was damp with the promise of rain. The city pressed in with its restless energy, but for once I didn't feel invisible in the crowd. My heels clicked against the pavement, a rhythm steady enough to drown the chaos in my chest. At home, I hung my jacket carefully on its hanger, lined my shoes neatly by the door, and stood in my small kitchen staring at nothing. For years, I had built a life of order. A spice rack alphabetized, a closet color-coded, a calendar blocked in 30-minute increments. Order had been my shield. It had kept me safe, useful, predictable, but order had also chained me. I poured another glass of red wine, the cheap kind that tasted faintly metallic, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit my apartment, pale against the gathering dark. The report I had given them was only the beginning. A statement of facts, a record of my value. But the true weapon was the other file, the one I had been building quietly, secretly, for 18 months. The log of irregular transactions. The map of money that had vanished like smoke. I scrolled through it slowly, every entry a reminder of how long I had carried this knowledge alone. payments to shell vendors with P.O. box addresses and no websites. Quarter after quarter, precise amounts, growing just enough to normalize with revenue. Elegant, calculated theft. $2.7 million. Sometimes I asked myself why I had not reported it to the authorities already. The answer was always the same, because Daniel had dismissed me, because leadership had chosen to ignore me, because I knew if I pushed too hard they would bury me along with the evidence. So I waited, I documented, I prepared. And now, for the first time, I had leverage. My phone buzzed with a new message. Meredith, my sister. A simple line, "How was your day?" I stared at the words for a long time, fingers hovering above the keyboard. I could tell her everything. I could spill the anger, the fear, the strange exhilaration. But I didn't. I typed back, "Busy, I'll call you tomorrow," because this wasn't a story to be told yet. It was still unfolding. I closed the messages and pulled up my calendar. 2 weeks until my resignation date. 24 hours until Garrett and his team gave me their answer. 60 days outlined in my knowledge transfer plan. Numbers, timelines, frameworks, everything I had always used to build systems for others. Now I was building one for myself. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The quiet of the apartment pressed in, heavy but familiar. For 9 years, I had let this company define me, shape me, use me. For 9 years, I had told myself it was enough to be the steady one, the reliable one, the person who solved the impossible. But tonight, I felt something else. Not just anger, not just exhaustion, something sharper. Purpose. I thought of Catherine Walsh, the woman who had walked away from this same company years ago and built her own empire. The one who had recognized my worth before anyone here did. Her offer letter sat in my bag, a silent promise of a future that could be different. Tomorrow, they would come back to me with their decision. Whether they tried to buy me, placate me, silence me, it did not matter, because the truth was already out, at least in me. And once you see your worth clearly, you cannot unsee it. I closed the laptop gently, set down my empty glass, and turned off the light. In the darkness, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, they will never overlook me again. Morning light spilled across my desk in the most ordinary way, as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis the day before. The hum of the air conditioning still droned too loud, the smell of burnt coffee drifted from the break room, and the usual shuffle of footsteps echoed through the office. Yet nothing felt the same. When I sat down, a silence rippled outward from my chair. My colleagues looked busy, but their stolen glances gave them away. The news had spread like wildfire. Everyone knew something had happened. No one knew exactly what. I opened my laptop, pretending to be absorbed in a budget variance report, but my senses stretched outward, catching the half-whispered conversations. She went to Garrett's office yesterday. I heard she threatened to quit. Did you see the file? They say HR sent salaries by mistake. Their voices dropped to murmurs whenever I moved. I could almost feel the questions pulsing in the air. Was it true? Would I leave? Was I reckless or brilliant or both? I kept my face blank, my hand steady on the keyboard. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Silence was its own power. At 11, Daniel appeared at my desk. His smile was brittle, the kind reserved for strangers at networking events. "Eloise, could I see you in my office for a moment?" I followed him down the hall, aware of eyes tracking us. His office smelled faintly of lemon polish and tension. He closed the door, gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. "I wanted to check in," he said, his tone overly casual. "I know yesterday was intense." "Intense is one word," I replied. He adjusted his tie, a nervous tick. "The executive team is reviewing your request. I just want to assure you we take your concerns seriously." I raised an eyebrow. 9 years of dismissal suggests otherwise. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, quickly masked. "I'm asking for patience. Give them time." 24 hours, I said evenly. That was the agreement. His jaw tightened. "Yes, of course." When I left his office, the whispers grew bolder. Some looked at me with curiosity, some with quiet admiration, others with thinly veiled resentment. I was no longer just Eloise, the dependable financial architect. I was a disruptor. And people did not know how to handle that. By the time the afternoon dragged in, I could feel the weight of their stares pressing against my back. I focused on my screen, on numbers that blurred into nonsense, waiting for the clock to release me. At 5 sharp, I gathered my bag. This time no one pretended not to watch. Their eyes followed me all the way to the elevator. Outside, the city air was thick with summer heat. I walked without destination, weaving through crowds, letting the movement settle the storm inside me. My phone buzzed with a message. "Catherine again. Dinner tonight still stands." I paused at the corner, the glow of a neon sign flickering against the pavement. I typed back, not tonight, soon, because tonight I needed quiet. Back home, I stripped off the careful armor of my work clothes, folded them with precision, and slipped into an old t-shirt. I poured a glass of water this time, not wine. My head needed clarity. I opened the secret file again, the log of payments. Row after row of transactions no one had cared to question. It had started with 1, then 2, then 3, until the pattern became undeniable. 13,875 to a consultancy I'd never heard of. 15,640 to another with no website. 18,250, like clockwork, every quarter. 18 months of recording, verifying, cross-checking. And finally, the pattern, nearly $3 million siphoned into the shadows. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. The evidence was ironclad, but timing was everything. If I revealed it too early, they would bury me with it. If I waited too long, someone else might stumble upon it and claim the credit. But right now, for the first time, the leverage was mine. I closed the laptop slowly, almost reverently. The phone buzzed again. Meredith this time. A selfie of her daughter grinning with spaghetti sauce smeared across her cheeks. A caption, she says, "Hi, Auntie L." I smiled despite myself, the knot in my chest loosening. I typed back, "Tell her I love her." For a moment, I let the image of my niece wash over me, grounding me. This was why I fought. Not just for money, not just for recognition, but for the principle that hard work deserved respect. That truth mattered. That silence only served the ones who exploited it. The next morning, the call came earlier than expected. 9 a.m. sharp. "Eloise," Garrett's assistant said, her voice tight, "the executive team would like to see you in the Pine Room." Of course they would. All our conference rooms were named after trees. Birch, oak, maple, pine. Corporate creativity at its finest. I slipped my notebook into my bag, smoothed my skirt, and walked across the floor. My colleagues watched openly now, their curiosity barely hidden. Each step toward the glass-walled conference room felt heavier, more deliberate. Inside, Garrett sat at the head of the table, Daniel to his left, Kyle to his right, Vanessa beside him, and a new face, Thomas Whitaker, Chief Legal Counsel. "Interesting. Please sit," Garrett said, gesturing. I remained standing for a beat too long, then lowered myself into the chair across from him, my notebook and pen aligned neatly before me. Garrett folded his hands. "We've reviewed your requests," he said. "And we are prepared to offer you a revised compensation package." Thomas slid a document across the table. I took my time reading it, aware of 4 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Salary adjustment to $155,000, retention bonus of $45,000, title of Senior Director of Financial Operations, a seat on the Executive Leadership Committee, everything I had asked for, and more. The desperation was almost palpable. I closed the folder slowly. "This is acceptable," I said at last. Daniel exhaled audibly, his relief almost comical. Kyle dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. Vanessa's expression remained cool, measured. Garrett's smile was tight. Thomas cleared his throat. "There is one additional matter," he said smoothly. "As part of this new arrangement, we would ask you to sign a standard confidentiality agreement regarding compensation structures and any irregularities you may have observed during your tenure." And there it was. I lifted my gaze to his. Irregularities? His face was a lawyer's mask. Standard language, nothing unusual. I let silence hang for 3 full seconds. "I'll need to review that carefully before signing. Please send it to me." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Of course." I gathered my things, stood, and moved toward the door. At the threshold, I paused. "One more thing. I would like written confirmation that the compensation review for other affected employees begins within 30 days. Vanessa and Garrett exchanged glances. Finally, she nodded. "We'll include that." I inclined my head slightly, then left, their eyes burning into my back as I walked across the office floor. My phone buzzed before I reached my desk. "Catherine again. Update." I typed back, "Counter offer accepted. NDA pending." Her reply came quick. "Perfect. Proceed as planned." I set the phone down, a slow smile curving my lips. Because the truth was, the real negotiation hadn't even begun. The ink on my new title had barely dried before the whispers began again. "Senior Director," someone muttered as I passed, the words carrying a faint edge of disbelief. Another voice, softer, followed. "Did you see the bonus they gave her?" The eyes that had once glanced past me now tracked my every step. Some looked at me with admiration, others with suspicion, and a few with open envy. After nearly a decade of invisibility, I had become visible in the worst way. as a disruption to their carefully balanced hierarchies. At my desk, Daniel stopped by carrying a cup of coffee. "Black, no sugar," he said, setting it gently beside my keyboard. I stared at him. 6 years of managing me, and not once had he remembered how I took my coffee. Now suddenly he did. "Thank you," I said, my tone even. He smiled thinly. "I just wanted you to know I appreciate your dedication." Dedication? A word that had shackled me for years. The rest of the office watched openly as he left, his attempt at goodwill transparent. I turned back to my screen, but the numbers blurred. The air felt heavier, charged with something unsaid. By noon, emails began to trickle in from people who had rarely acknowledged me before. Invitations to lunch. Questions about ongoing projects. Comments laced with forced enthusiasm. They weren't reaching out because they valued me. They were reaching out because they sensed the shift in power and wanted to anchor themselves to it. I ignored most of them. That evening, I sat in my apartment with the confidentiality agreement glowing on my laptop screen. Pages of legal jargon scrolled by, filled with clauses about proprietary structures and non-disclosure of irregularities. Irregularities. The word repeated like a drumbeat. I highlighted the section, reading it again and again. Thomas Whitaker, the chief legal counsel, had called it standard, but nothing about it was standard. It was a gag order dressed up in corporate language meant to bury everything I had seen. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. They thought they had bought me. They thought a raise, a bonus, and a title would silence me. They thought my signature would erase $2.7 million siphoned into the shadows. I closed the file. The anger that had burned hot days ago now settled into something colder, sharper. A steel edge. This wasn't about my salary anymore. It never had been. The next morning, the office air felt heavier. People avoided eye contact now, uncertain how close they could stand to me without being noticed. Those who whispered before now hushed when I walked by. Daniel stopped me in the hall. "Eloise, about the agreement? I'll review it in due time," I cut in, my voice calm but firm. He swallowed. "Of course." As he walked away, I saw Kyle and Vanessa speaking in low tones near the conference rooms, their eyes flicking toward me before darting away. Secrets on top of secrets. I returned to my desk, opened my secret file once more. Every irregular transaction glowed back at me, undeniable, unshakable. 13,875, 15,640, 18,250. Row after row, quarter after quarter. I whispered the numbers under my breath like an incantation. If they wanted my silence, they would have to face the truth first. That night I called Catherine. Her voice came through warm, steady. "So, how does it feel to finally make them squirm?" I smiled faintly. "Like breathing after holding my breath for 9 years. And the NDA? I'm stalling." "Good, keep stalling. Timing is everything." Her words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Timing was everything. I poured myself another glass of water, stared out the window at the city lights, and made myself a promise. The next time they tried to silence me, I would not just resist. I would burn through their lies until nothing remained. The following day began with an unusual quiet. No one stopped at my desk, no polite questions about my projects, no hollow invitations for coffee. The pendulum had swung the other way. Where curiosity had burned yesterday, caution ruled today. When I stepped into the break room, 2 colleagues fell silent mid-conversation. One fiddled with the sugar packets like they were suddenly fascinating. The other mumbled an excuse and left. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. People were recalibrating, testing how to treat me. Was I still one of them, or had I crossed a line into something else? Back at my desk, emails piled up. Some were ordinary, others dripped with subtext. "Looking forward to collaborating on the new initiative," one said, though I had never been included on that initiative before. Another, "Your leadership is inspiring." That one almost made me laugh. My so-called leadership had gone unnoticed for nearly a decade. Only now, when I had threatened to walk, did they see it. It was strange, this new visibility. A spotlight I had never asked for. I had once believed recognition would feel like validation. Instead, it felt like exposure. At noon, Vanessa appeared at my desk. She rarely ventured onto the floor, preferring the insulation of her corner office. Her presence drew stares. "Walk with me," she said simply. I followed her through the glass doors and into the quiet of the executive wing. She moved with precise steps, her heels striking the polished floor like punctuation marks. She stopped in an empty meeting room, closed the door, and turned to face me. "You've forced our hand," she said without preamble. I kept my face neutral. I presented facts. Her eyes narrowed. "Facts with consequences." I waited. "You're smart," she said. Smarter than most here, but you need to understand something. This company doesn't reward disruption. It rewards loyalty, obedience. The word lodged in my chest like a stone. And yet, I said softly, loyalty gave me $98,000 after 9 years. She studied me, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled faintly. Careful, Alois, you're playing a dangerous game. I know. Her smile sharpened. Good, then maybe you'll win. She left me with that, the door clicking shut behind her. For the rest of the afternoon, I replayed her words. Dangerous game. Win. By evening, the office thinned out. I lingered, staring at the glow of spreadsheets that suddenly seemed trivial. Finally, I packed my bag and left. Outside, the city pulsed with neon and noise, but I walked through it as if encased in glass. Every step echoed with Vanessa's warning. Every reflection in the darkened windows looked like a version of myself I barely recognized. At home, I opened the confidentiality agreement again. I read every clause slowly, as if each one might reveal a hidden blade. The language was careful, deliberate. Non-disclosure of proprietary processes. Restriction on sharing institutional knowledge. And that one word again, irregularities. I highlighted it, stared at it. My heart beat steadily like a drum. I thought of Thomas Whitaker, his lawyer's smile, his unblinking calm. I thought of how he had slid the folder across the table as though it were routine, as though silencing me were just another line item. But I wasn't routine. I wasn't silence. I closed the file and opened my secret log. The transactions waited as damning as ever. One day soon, I told myself. One day soon I'll drop this on their desk like a bomb. I leaned back in my chair, eyes burning from the screen. For the first time in years, I felt less like an employee and more like something else. An observer, a witness, maybe even a threat. The thought made me smile. The next morning began with rain. The city streets gleamed wet, umbrellas bloomed like flowers in the crowd. By the time I reached the office, my shoes were damp, my hair frizzed at the edges. Inside, the mood was no brighter. People hunched over their desks, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the steady drumming of rain against the windows. At 10, Garrett called me in. His office smelled faintly of leather and coffee, as always. He gestured for me to sit. You've made quite an impact, he said, his tone carefully neutral. I presented data, I replied. He gave me that CEO smile, the one polished by years of boardrooms and investor calls. You've always been thorough, that's why we value you. Value. The word rang hollow. He leaned forward. This new role, this compensation adjustment, it reflects our recognition of that value. But we need alignment, Alois. We need assurance that you're fully committed. I met his gaze steadily. Commitment is earned, not assumed. For a second, his smile faltered. Then it returned, tighter this time. You'll find that commitment works both ways, I stood. Then let's see if that's true. I left his office without waiting for dismissal. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed. Catherine again. Remember, timing, don't play your full hand too early. I typed back, I know. But even as I sent it, I felt the weight of the log in my bag, like a hidden weapon pressing against my side. I had played their game for 9 years. Now it was my turn. The hours after my meeting with Garrett moved like molasses. Each task felt hollow, each spreadsheet meaningless. The fluorescent lights hummed, the rain tapped steadily against the windows, and still I sat there, typing numbers I no longer cared about. At 3 o'clock, an email landed in my inbox from legal. Subject line, confidentiality agreement, final draft. My pulse quickened. I opened it slowly, scrolling through the pages. It was even heavier than before, packed with clauses that tangled together like barbed wire. Comprehensive non-disclosure. Restriction on disclosure of compensation data. Waiver of rights regarding financial irregularities. They had sharpened the blade. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words blur. They thought they had won. They thought they had boxed me in, tied me up neatly with legal ribbon, silenced me with a signature. I almost laughed. When the office finally emptied, I remained, the glow of my laptop the only light in the dim space. I opened my secret log again, the spreadsheet of irregular payments. Row after row stared back at me, silent but damning. I traced the numbers with my fingertip on the screen, whispering them under my breath like a mantra. 13,875. 15,640. 18,250. I thought of the faces around that conference table. Garrett, calm but desperate. Daniel, nervous and weak. Kyle, sweating through his shirt. Vanessa, sharp-eyed and calculating. And Thomas, the lawyer, his mask of neutrality cracking just slightly when I questioned him. They wanted silence. What they would get was exposure. I closed the file, shut down the laptop, and sat in the dark for a long time. The rain outside softened, the hum of the building's ventilation system filled the quiet, and my own heartbeat steadied. 9 years I had been their invisible backbone. 9 years of carrying the weight they refused to see. Now the roles had shifted. They were the ones under my gaze. When I finally rose, stretching stiff muscles, I felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because I had chosen my side. I was no longer pleading for fairness. I was preparing for war. I gathered my bag, stepped into the empty hallway, and walked toward the elevator. The floor was silent, every desk dark. My reflection in the glass doors stared back at me calm, composed, but with something new in my eyes: purpose. As the elevator descended, I whispered into the silence, a vow to myself, to the years I had sacrificed, to the truth I now carried like a weapon. They will not silence me. When the doors opened onto the empty lobby, the city lights spilled in through the glass, fractured and shimmering on the wet pavement outside. The world was waiting. So was I, and tomorrow, the game would begin again. The morning after my access was stripped, I woke before my alarm. The city outside my window was still dark, only the glow of streetlights breaking through the thin curtains. For a long time I lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the hum of silence press against me. My chest felt tight, but not with fear. It was something else, a recognition, a dawning truth. They weren't promoting me, they were containing me. I showered, dressed in the same careful armor of pencil skirt and pressed blouse, pinned my hair back tight, and left my apartment as if nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. When I swiped my badge at the building's glass entrance, the delay was there again, a fractional pause before the green light blinked. I stepped through anyway, the sound of my heels sharp against the marble. People glanced up from the security desk, looked at me too long, then looked away. By the time I reached the office floor, the hum of tension was unmistakable. Conversations dipped when I walked by. Screens lit up suddenly, as if people were working too hard to notice me. The silence said more than words could. At my desk, my monitor lit with its usual glow, but the systems I had built for years remained locked. A hollow feeling spread in my chest, part loss, part fury. I had poured myself into these systems, designed them to be bulletproof, elegant, efficient. They had been mine, and now I was an intruder in my own work. I tried to focus on emails, on project updates, but everything felt hollow. It was like being forced to read a language I no longer believed in, numbers and words on the screen that meant nothing. By 10, Vanessa appeared. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Walk with me," she said, her voice cool as steel. I followed her down the corridor, past the rows of cubicles where eyes tracked us silently. We slipped into an unused conference room, the blinds drawn, the air stale. She closed the door, turned to me, and folded her arms. "You're making people nervous." I held her gaze. "People should be nervous." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "You know what I admire about you, Alois? You're not pretending anymore. You know exactly what you are." "And what's that?" "An asset and a threat." Her words landed heavy in the quiet. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "The difference between the two depends on your choices." I didn't flinch. "Then maybe you should worry about the company's choices too." She smiled faintly, then turned to leave. At the door she paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Be careful. You don't want to become someone they decide to cut loose." The words hung in the air long after she was gone. Back at my desk, I stared at my blank screen, my reflection faint against the glass. The hum of the office pressed around me, but I felt oddly still. Her warning wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. They were watching me, measuring me, deciding what to do with me. By noon, the subtle signs grew sharper. My phone extension rang twice, then clicked off before I could answer. My parking pass refused to open the garage gate, forcing me to call security to buzz me through. Calendar invites disappeared from my schedule, only to reappear minutes later. Little things, small enough to be dismissed as glitches, but too precise to be random. When I returned from lunch, Daniel was waiting at my desk. He looked tired, his tie slightly askew, his eyes ringed with shadows. "Can we talk?" he asked. I followed him into his office, the blinds drawn tight. He shut the door, exhaled heavily, and sat behind his desk. For a moment he rubbed his temples as if gathering courage. "Alois," he said finally, "I don't know what you're doing, but you need to stop." My jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "You think you're forcing change, you think you're fighting for what's right, but you don't understand how things work here. The higher you climb, the less room there is for error, and you've already stepped too far." "I've stepped exactly as far as I needed to," I said. He shook his head. "I've been here 20 years, I've seen people try what you're trying, it doesn't end well." "Maybe it doesn't end well for the company," I shot back. Something in his expression faltered. Fear, not for me, for himself. "I can't protect you," he whispered. I never asked you to, I replied. The silence between us stretched. Finally, he looked away, his shoulders slumping. Just be careful, he said. I left his office without another word. That evening the building emptied, but I stayed. My laptop glowed faint in the dim space, the hum of the servers the only sound. I pulled out the small black USB drive I kept hidden in my bag and plugged it in. The secret log opened instantly. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Each entry neat, precise, undeniable. $2.7 million siphoned into shadows. I stared at the evidence, the weight of it heavy in my chest. For months it had been just mine, a secret I guarded like a lifeline. Now it felt like dynamite primed and ready. My phone buzzed on the desk. "Catherine, you sound tense," she said when I answered. "I'm being cut off," I admitted. "They've stripped my access, boxed me out, they're trying to silence me." "That means they know you matter," she said. "It means you're dangerous to them. They're circling. Vanessa, Daniel, even Garrett. It feels like a trap tightening." "Good," she said calmly. "That's how you know you've hit the nerve. Keep going, keep the pressure. But remember, don't reveal your full hand yet. Timing is everything." Her words steadied me. Timing, not yet. After we hung up, I sat in the dim office, staring at the glow of the log. Each number was a secret they thought buried. Each entry a blade I held quietly. When I finally shut the laptop, the city was deep in night. I walked through the lobby alone, my reflection fractured in the glass doors. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining under neon. I walked home with the USB heavy in my bag, its weight both anchor and weapon. At home, I poured a glass of water, sat in the dark, and whispered to myself. They think they've caged me, but cages break. The next morning, I felt eyes on me the moment I stepped onto the floor. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads bent quickly toward screens. Even those who had once smiled at me now avoided my gaze. I wasn't just a Lois anymore. I was a disruption, a danger. At 10, Garrett called me in. His office was immaculate as always, his expression calm, practiced. Thomas Whitaker sat beside him, his lawyer's mask perfectly in place. "Eloise," Garrett began smoothly, "we value your contributions. We want you to feel supported in your new role." Thomas slid a folder across the desk. "We just need to finalize the confidentiality agreement. Standard practice." I didn't touch it. "I'll review it." Thomas smiled faintly. "Of course, but we'd appreciate your signature by the end of the week." I let the silence stretch, then said, "If you want my signature, you'll have to give me more than words." Garrett's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you asking?" "Proof," I said, "that you intend to change, that I'm not just another name on a payroll chart." For a second, the mask slipped. A flash of irritation crossed his face before the CEO's calm returned. "We'll see what can be arranged." I stood. "Do that." When I walked out, my pulse was steady, my steps even. But inside, I knew, this wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a war, and I had already chosen my side. The week after my promotion was the strangest of my career. On paper, I had won. My salary was doubled, my title elevated, my name suddenly appearing in leadership updates and all company emails. Yet every victory tasted of ash. The access restrictions remained. The confidentiality agreement loomed like a shadow. And the eyes of the office clung to me, not with admiration, but with something colder. Suspicion. Fear. On Monday morning, I arrived early, hoping to claim a sliver of quiet before the day began. The floor was empty, the fluorescent lights humming over endless rows of silent desks. I logged in, more out of habit than necessity. My inbox blinked with unread messages. One subject line caught my eye: Internal Audit, FORWARDED. I frowned. It wasn't addressed to me, yet somehow it had landed in my inbox. I opened it carefully, scanning the text. A routine quarterly audit summary, dense with numbers, but buried halfway down was a flagged note: vendor discrepancy, pending clarification. The name leapt out at me. A shell company I recognized from my private log. My pulse quickened. The email wasn't supposed to be here. Someone had sent it by mistake, or maybe not. Maybe someone inside wanted me to see it. I leaned back, the air suddenly heavy. I wasn't the only one who knew. For the rest of the morning, I couldn't focus. Every conversation around me felt loaded, every glance a question. Who else was aware? Who had slipped that audit report into my inbox, and why? At noon, I ducked into the break room. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. Vanessa was there, pouring herself tea. She looked up, her eyes sharp as always. "You're in early these days," she said casually. "Trying to keep up," I replied. Her smile was faint, knowing. "Careful. Sometimes curiosity uncovers things you wish you hadn't seen." I froze. Was it coincidence? Or was she telling me she knew exactly what had landed in my inbox? I didn't answer. I poured my coffee, left the room, and felt her gaze burn into my back as I walked away. By the time I returned to my desk, the audit email was gone, deleted, not just from my inbox, but from the server logs. Erased as if it had never existed, but I had already saved a copy. That night at home, I opened my laptop and compared it to my secret log. The pattern matched perfectly. Quarter after quarter, payments disguised as routine vendor fees, all siphoned through the same handful of shell companies. But this new report revealed something else. The amounts were growing bolder. No longer 13,000 or 18,000, now 45,000, 62, 90. Someone was escalating. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the screen. This wasn't just petty theft anymore. It was systematic, aggressive, almost daring someone to notice. The next day, whispers thickened in the office. Two executives from departments I rarely interacted with were suddenly seen entering Garrett's office, their faces drawn, their voices low. Kyle from HR looked paler than ever, his hands shaking when he passed me in the hall. And Daniel avoided me altogether. By midweek, I was certain something was unraveling. On Thursday afternoon, Catherine called. Her voice was calm, steady as ever. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked. I stiffened. "Seen what?" "The escalation, the pattern. I told you, Alois. What you uncovered is only the surface. They've been running this game for years. You think it stops at 3 million? My throat went dry. How much then? Try 30. The number hit me like a blow. 30 million. That's not incompetence, I whispered. That's orchestration. Exactly, she said. And if you're not careful, you'll end up like the last person who asked too many questions. Who? The line went silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "Look into the resignation files. 3 years ago, a man named Oliver Crane." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it chilled me. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the faint reflection of my own face on the laptop screen. My log, my evidence, suddenly felt smaller. What I had thought was a secret advantage was only a fraction of the truth. 30 million, a vanished employee, and a system designed not to fail but to feed. The first twist slid into place, quiet and undeniable. This was never about my salary. This was about survival. I couldn't sleep that night. The number 30 million pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat, steady and sickening. I lay in the dark, my apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, staring at the ceiling. Oliver Crane, the name echoed. Catherine had spoken it like a warning, like a ghost's whisper. At 2 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, the glow painting my face pale. A search of the company intranet turned up nothing. His name had been scrubbed, erased as if he had never existed. But the internet is rarely so tidy. It took time, digging through old LinkedIn profiles, archived newsletters, industry announcements. Finally, a trace appeared. Oliver Crane, senior financial analyst, Harrington & Lowe, listed in a conference program 4 years ago. After that, nothing. No updates, no new jobs, no farewell post, just silence. I leaned back, my skin prickling. People don't just vanish in the digital age, not unless someone makes them vanish. The next morning, the office felt different. Sharper somehow. My colleagues' eyes darted away from mine faster, their whispers more urgent, more afraid. It was as though they sensed I was walking on dangerous ground, and they didn't want to be pulled into the quicksand with me. When I sat at my desk, an envelope waited on my keyboard. No name, no return address, just a plain white envelope. I glanced around. No one looked at me. Everyone was suddenly absorbed in their screens. I slipped the envelope into my bag and waited until evening to open it. At home, my hands shook as I tore the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Oliver Crane, personnel file, confidential, my breath caught. It wasn't the full file, just fragments, photocopied pages blurred at the edges. Employment start date. Role, evaluations marked exceeds expectations. Then the last page, resignation, reason, personal, except the signature line was blank. No letter of resignation, no signature, just a typed note claiming personal reasons. He hadn't resigned. He'd been erased. My chest tightened as I stared at the page. Someone wanted me to see this, someone inside, but who and why? The next day I confronted Daniel. "Do you remember Oliver Crane?" I asked casually, standing in the doorway of his office, his face drained of color. "Where did you hear that name? So you do remember." He looked around quickly, then shut the door. His voice dropped. "Alois, just don't." "Why?" "Because he made the same mistake you're making. He asked questions." "What happened to him?" Daniel's eyes flicked away. "He resigned." I slid the photocopy across his desk, the unsigned resignation form. His hands trembled as he looked at it. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "That doesn't matter. Tell me the truth." For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Then he leaned forward, his voice so low I could barely hear it. He didn't resign. One day he was just gone, his badge deactivated, his office cleared. HR said he left for personal reasons, but no one ever heard from him again. The words hung heavy in the air. "And you said nothing," I accused. "What was I supposed to do?" Daniel snapped. His face was pale, his voice shaking. "Fight them. You don't fight people like that, Alois. You don't win." I stared at him, the weight of his fear pressing against me. For 9 years, I had seen Daniel as weak, spineless. But now I saw something else, survival. He had chosen to bend instead of break. But I couldn't, not anymore. That night, I called Catherine. "Oliver Crane," I said. Voice was steady. "So you found him." He didn't resign. No, he uncovered too much, and when he pushed, he disappeared. Disappeared how? You don't want to know? Yes, I said fiercely. I do. There was silence on the line. Then Catherine said, "Alois, you have to decide what you're willing to risk. They will not go quietly. If you keep digging, you won't just be fighting for a raise or a title. You'll be fighting for your life." Her words chilled me. But beneath the fear, something else burned hotter. Resolve. The next morning, I arrived early again. My inbox blinked with new messages. Among them was one that froze me. Subject, "We see you." No sender, no signature, just 2 words. My stomach knotted. The office around me buzzed with its usual hum, but I felt exposed, stripped bare. Someone was watching. Someone knew. I closed the message, deleted it, but the words burned into me. "We see you." That evening, as I walked home, I felt it. Footsteps behind me, steady, keeping pace. My heart pounded as I quickened mine. When I glanced back, the street was crowded, faces blurred in the neon, no one distinct. But I knew I wasn't just fighting a company anymore. I was fighting something bigger, something that swallowed people whole, and I had just stepped into its jaws. The email haunted me. "We see you." 2 words, nothing more, no sender, no timestamp, as if it had slipped past the company's servers like a ghost. But the message was clear. I was not invisible. Not anymore. I deleted it. I emptied my trash folder. I even cleared the server cache. But I knew better than to think it was gone. Nothing digital ever truly vanishes. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I walked circles around my apartment, my thoughts spiraling tighter and tighter. They knew I was looking. They knew I had seen Oliver's file. They knew too much already. And yet, instead of fear crushing me, something else began to rise. Anger. 9 years of loyalty. 9 years of being overlooked, underpaid, dismissed. And now, when I finally demanded recognition, I discovered the truth. I was working inside a machine designed to consume people like me, like Oliver, like Catherine before she escaped. No more. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than ever before sunrise. The building's glass doors reflected the dark sky, fractured by street lamps. Inside, the security guard barely looked up. At my desk, I slipped my USB into the port. The log glowed on the screen, rows of numbers damning as ever. But today, I didn't just look. I acted. I copied the file, I encrypted it. And then I sent it to myself to a private email Catherine had set up for me weeks ago under a name that wasn't mine. For the first time in months, I exhaled. A backup. If they wiped my drive tomorrow, I would still have the truth. By mid-morning, the office buzzed with its usual performance of productivity, but I noticed things I hadn't before. A man in a suit I didn't recognize standing too long by the elevators. A pair of junior analysts who kept glancing at me, whispering behind their hands. Daniel ducking into Garrett's office, closing the blinds immediately. I was a variable they couldn't control, and variables made systems unstable. At lunch, I slipped away, taking the long walk to a cafe 6 blocks from the office. I sat by the window, my coffee cooling untouched, my eyes scanning the street. 15 minutes later, Catherine slid into the seat across from me. No greeting, no smile, just business. "You got the email," she said. "Yes." "That means they're watching you closer now. You don't have much time." "I already copied the log," I told her. "Encrypted, backed up. If they take me down, the evidence survives." Her eyes flickered, almost approving. "Good, but you need more than numbers. Numbers can be explained away, manipulated. You need proof that connects the money to a name, a face." "And Oliver?" I asked, her jaw tightened. "Oliver was close, too close. He found names, that's why he vanished." A chill spread through me. "Then where do I start?" Catherine slid a folded piece of paper across the table, a name and address. "This woman worked in compliance 3 years ago. She left quietly after Oliver disappeared. If anyone knows what happened, it's her. But be careful, Alois. If you talk to her, they'll know." I slipped the paper into my bag, heart pounding. When I returned to the office, Vanessa was waiting at my desk. Her expression was unreadable, her voice smooth. "Busy lunch?" she asked. I met her gaze evenly. "Just coffee." Her smile was faint, dangerous. "Be careful, Alois. Curiosity can be costly." I didn't answer. That night, I took the subway across town, the address burning in my pocket. The train rocked and screeched, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. I sat stiffly, my hands clenched in my lap, every passenger around me a potential threat. The address led me to a modest apartment building, the kind that looked tired but safe. I climbed the stairs slowly, my breath tight. Her name was Marian Doyle. When she opened the door, she looked older than I expected, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes wary. She studied me for a long moment before speaking. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. "I need answers," I told her. "About Oliver Crane." "About the payments." Her hand tightened on the door. "Go home, Alois." My chest tightened. "Please, I have proof, I just need to know what it means." For a moment she hesitated, then she opened the door wider. Inside, her apartment smelled of tea and old books. She gestured for me to sit. "You're braver than I was," she said quietly, "or maybe just more desperate." I leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." Her eyes darkened. "Oliver found something. He traced the payments to an account offshore. Cayman Islands. The account wasn't in a company's name, it was in a person." "Whose?" She shook her head. "He never told me, he said he needed to be sure. The next week he was gone." My pulse thundered in my ears. "Do you know who erased him?" Her voice was a whisper. "Garrett, or someone above him. This company isn't just hiding theft, Alois, it's built on it." The words hit like a blade. She reached across the table, gripping my hand hard. "Get out while you can, before you disappear too." I swallowed hard. "I can't, not anymore." She studied me for a long moment, then released my hand. "Then God help you." When I left her apartment, the night air was sharp and cold. I walked quickly, my bag clutched tight, every shadow a threat. For the first time, the scope of it pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just a corrupt CEO. It was a system designed to consume people like Oliver, like Marian, like me. And yet, as I stepped into the darkness, my fear hardened into resolve. They had erased him, they had silenced her. But they would not silence me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Oliver Crane's unsigned resignation form. I heard Marian Doyle's voice, low and urgent. "They erased him. They'll erase you too." But fear had lost its grip on me. Something sharper had taken its place. I spent the night at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop burning against the darkness. I pulled open my encrypted copy of the log, then Marian's words echoed. "Cayman Islands, offshore." I began digging. Most public databases were useless. Shell companies, post office boxes, layers upon layers of protection. But the pattern was there if you looked long enough. Routing codes repeated. Account numbers shifted but shared a root. The same entity was behind all of it, hiding in plain sight. By dawn, my eyes ached, my hands trembled, but I had something. A thread. One recurring name, faint in the metadata of a scanned invoice. Whitaker Holdings. I froze. Whitaker, Thomas Whitaker. The company's chief legal counsel. The man who had slid the confidentiality agreement across the table with that practiced smile. I shut the laptop quickly, as though the name itself could burn me. If this was true, if the money funneled offshore tied back to him, then everything, the gag order, the erasures, the fear, made sense. And it meant I was closer to the truth than ever. When I arrived at the office that morning, the air felt heavier. Conversations stilled as I walked by. My monitor flickered when I logged in, a delay too deliberate to be coincidence. My access remained crippled, but someone was still watching every keystroke. At 10, Garrett summoned me. His office smelled of leather and fresh polish, immaculate as always. Vanessa was there, arms folded. Thomas sat beside her, his expression unreadable. "Alois," Garrett began smoothly, "we're concerned." I sat, hands steady on the table. "About what?" "You've been distracted," he said. "Leaving the building during odd hours, accessing files outside your purview. We expect more focus from our leadership team." Vanessa's gaze pierced me. "Loyalty, Alois, that's the foundation of this company." I met her eyes evenly. "Loyalty should be earned." Thomas finally spoke, his voice calm, polished. "We simply want reassurance that you're committed to the future here." I thought of the name and the metadata. Whitaker Holdings, his name, his future. I smiled faintly. "Of course." Garrett seemed satisfied. "Good, then sign the agreement and we'll put all this unpleasantness behind us." My pulse quickened. They were cornering me. I stood, gathering my notebook. "I'll review it again tonight." Thomas's smile didn't waver. "Do that." As I left the office, my skin prickled. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Back at my desk, Daniel appeared, his face pale. "What did they want?" he whispered. "Commitment," I said. He swallowed hard. "Alois, you need to stop." "I can't," I said quietly. "You don't understand. They're not just executives, they're connected. You push too far," and he stopped himself, his eyes darting around nervously. "Just don't end up like Oliver." I stared at him. You knew. His silence was answer enough. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I walked for hours through the city streets, neon lights reflecting in rain-slick pavement, my thoughts spinning. I thought of Catherine, who had escaped, of Marion, who lived in fear, of Oliver, who had vanished, and of Thomas Whitaker, the man whose name was buried in the shadows of offshore accounts. At home, I encrypted the file again, sent a copy to a second anonymous email account Catherine had given me. Redundancy, safety, but I knew it wasn't enough. Numbers weren't proof. I needed something more, a signature, a document, a voice. I pulled out the envelope with Oliver's file fragment. The unsigned resignation form, proof of erasure, proof that the company lied, and suddenly I knew that was my path, not just to show theft but to show the pattern of silence. I would find the trail they thought erased. The next morning, I requested access to archived HR files. Kyle from HR looked startled, sweat gathering at his temples. Why do you need those? For succession planning, I said smoothly. New role, new responsibilities. He hesitated. Those files are restricted. I leaned forward, then lift the restriction. His eyes darted away. I'll check. I walked back to my desk, my pulse steady. They were hiding something, and if Kyle was afraid, it meant I was close. That evening, as I left the building, the same feeling returned. Footsteps behind me. I quickened my pace, turning corners sharply, weaving through crowds. At one point, I slipped into a bookstore, pretending to browse, my eyes fixed on the window. The footsteps didn't follow inside. But when I left, a black car idled at the corner, no driver visible. I walked home with my skin prickling, every nerve on edge. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, double-checked the windows. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, pale and determined. I whispered to it, "You can watch me all you want, but you can't stop me." For the first time, I believed it. The envelope with Oliver Crane's unsigned resignation sat on my desk like a weight I couldn't shake. Every time I glanced at it, the edges seemed sharper, the truth more dangerous. If one name had been erased, how many others had vanished the same way? I needed proof. The next morning, I cornered Kyle in the hallway before he could slip into a meeting. His face went pale the instant he saw me. "Have you looked at the archive request?" I asked. He stammered. "Eloise, those files are delicate, highly restricted." "Then restrict them to me," I said flatly. He swallowed hard, his tie askew. "I'll see what I can do." I leaned closer. "You'll do it, or I'll ask Vanessa why HR is blocking a senior director from doing her job." His Adam's apple bobbed. He nodded quickly and hurried off. By noon, a new folder appeared in my drive. ARCHIVES Confidential. I opened it immediately, scanning quickly. Rows of resignation forms, each stamped, each signed at least on the surface. But patterns emerged fast. 12 employees in 7 years, all high-performing. All noted for exceeding expectations. All marked as resignations for personal reasons. And 3 of them had unsigned letters, just like Oliver's. My stomach twisted. These weren't resignations. They were erasures. The hum of the office faded as I stared at the screen, the walls closing in. I wasn't uncovering a few bad payments. I was uncovering a system that consumed anyone who got too close. That night, when I returned to my apartment, the air felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. I set my bag down, scanning the space. My books were slightly out of order. The drawer I always kept locked with spare keys had been shifted. Someone had been here. My skin prickled. I checked my laptop. It looked untouched, but the login history showed access at 3:17 a.m. the night before. I hadn't been awake then. They weren't just watching me at work. They were in my home. I unplugged the laptop immediately, stuffed it into my bag, and left. I walked aimlessly for hours, the city lights glaring, my reflection fractured in every window I passed. When I finally returned, exhaustion pressing heavy, I shoved a chair under the door handle before collapsing on the couch. Sleep came in fits. I woke at every sound, every creak of the building. Shadows stretched long across the walls, distorted, watching. By morning, my nerves were raw, but the fear had burned down to something steadier. Resolve. I carried the laptop to a cafe across town, one I never visited before. I logged into a public Wi-Fi, opened the archive again, and began digging deeper. 12 employees, Oliver among them, 3 unsigned resignations. I pulled their names into a list, cross-referencing LinkedIn, industry directories, even old conference rosters. The pattern was unmistakable. After their resignations, none of them reappeared. No new jobs, no updates, just silence. Erased, except one. A woman named Rachel Singh, marked as resigned 5 years ago. But a forgotten blog post, buried deep in a community forum, listed her as a speaker at a local accounting workshop just 2 years earlier. She was alive. I sat back, my pulse racing. One had survived, and maybe she still could talk. That afternoon, Garrett summoned me again. His office gleamed as usual, but the air was heavier, darker. Vanessa and Thomas sat waiting. "Eloise," Garrett said, his tone smooth but tight, "we're concerned about your extracurricular activities." I kept my voice even. "Meaning?" "Digging into archives," Vanessa said sharply. "Contacting former employees, this is not part of your role." I met her gaze. "Neither is theft." The silence snapped like a whip. Garrett's jaw tightened. Thomas's mask didn't shift, but his eyes gleamed. "You're treading dangerous ground," Garrett said finally. I leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "Then maybe you should worry about the ground you're standing on." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Thomas spoke, his voice quiet but edged. "Sign the agreement, Eloise. It's the only way this ends well for you." I stood slowly, gathering my notebook. "We'll see." Their eyes followed me as I left, burning into my back. Back at my desk, Daniel hovered, his face drawn. "What did they say?" "They want me to stop." He swallowed. "Then stop." I shook my head. "No." "Eloise, they erased Oliver," I snapped too sharply. His eyes widened, fear flashing. "You know," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "and I know about the others, 12 in total. You've known all along." He looked broken, his voice cracking. "You don't understand. They can destroy you." "Then let them try," I said coldly. That night, I left the office with my bag clutched tight. The black car was back at the corner. Its headlights flicked on as I passed. I didn't look back. At home, I pulled out Rachel Singh's name, the one survivor. Her blog post listed a workshop address. If she was still alive, if she was still out there, she might be the key. The first unerased voice. The one who could prove I wasn't alone. The name glowed on my screen like a lifeline, Rachel Singh. Her resignation file matched the others' personal reasons, glowing praise, sudden disappearance. But unlike Oliver, unlike the rest, there was a trace of her still alive in the world. A forgotten blog entry from 2 years ago, advertising her as a speaker at a workshop on nonprofit accounting. If Rachel was still alive, she was the first crack in the company's wall of silence. The next morning, I called the community center that had hosted the workshop. My voice was calm, professional, my words chosen with care. "I'm looking for Rachel Singh. She gave a seminar here a couple of years ago. I'd like to reach her for consulting work." The receptionist hesitated, then said, "Rachel doesn't do much speaking anymore, but she lives in the neighborhood. Would you like me to pass along a message?" "Yes," I said quickly. "Please tell her Eloise Warren would like to meet. It's important." The receptionist promised to try. All day, I waited. My work blurred into static, meaningless numbers on meaningless screens. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt. Nothing came. By 5 o'clock, I packed my bag. My colleague's eyes tracked me as I crossed the floor. Whispers swirled. "She's still digging. She doesn't know when to stop." In the lobby, the black car was waiting again. Same corner, same idle hum. I walked past it without slowing. My reflection shimmered in its tinted windows, fractured and ghost-like. That night, I barely slept. I left every light in my apartment on, my bag beside me, the USB drive clutched in my hand. At 3 a.m., a noise woke me. A faint scrape against the door. My breath caught. I stood frozen, every nerve burning. The scrape came again, softer this time, then silence. When I finally forced myself to check, the hallway was empty. But the chair I had wedged under the handle had shifted an inch. They had tried. By morning, my fear had hardened into steel. At noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, my voice tight. "Is this Eloise?" The voice was soft, cautious, unfamiliar. "Yes. This is Rachel." My heart stuttered. She spoke quickly. "I don't have much time. We can't talk on the phone. If you really want answers, meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. at Eastbrook Park. Bring nothing. Tell no one." The line went dead. For hours after, I sat in silence, my pulse racing. Rachel was alive. She was reaching out, but the fear in her voice clung to me. The next morning, I left my bag at home, carrying only my phone and wallet. I took the long route, switching trains twice, weaving through crowds. Every reflection in every window felt like an eye on me. Eastbrook Park was quiet, the grass damp with morning dew. Families walked dogs, children chased each other, the ordinary world oblivious to the weight pressing on me. I sat on a bench and waited. 10 minutes later, a woman approached. She wore a long coat, her hair tucked under a scarf, sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. She looked older than the photo I had found online, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. She sat beside me without greeting. "Eloise," she said softly. "Yes." Her hands twisted in her lap. "You shouldn't have looked for me." "I had to," I said. "You're the only one left. The others, they vanished." She nodded once. "I know. Why did you survive?" Her mouth tightened. Because I ran, because I left before they could erase me, and because I stayed quiet. Then why meet me now? Her eyes flicked to mine behind her glasses. Because I saw your name, and I knew you were walking the same path. Someone has to tell you the truth. Tell me then. Her voice dropped lower. It's not just about money. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, they're funding something bigger than this company. My skin prickled. What? She shook her head. I don't know, Oliver found more, too much, that's why he vanished. I only saw enough to know I didn't want to see the rest. I leaned closer. Whose name was on the accounts? Her lips parted, but before she could answer, her head snapped up. A man stood across the path, watching us. Suit, sunglasses. Still, too still. Rachel's hand gripped mine hard. They found me? Who is he? I whispered. Her breath came fast. Run. Before I could respond, she stood abruptly, walking quickly down the path. The man followed. I sat frozen, my heart hammering, my breath caught in my throat. Rachel disappeared into the trees, the man behind her. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then both were gone. I waited an hour, too. She never came back. That night, I returned to my apartment shaking. I locked the door, wedged the chair, sat on the floor clutching the USB. Rachel had tried to tell me, and now she was gone, just like Oliver, just like the others. And I knew with cold, absolute certainty that I was next. The night after Rachel vanished, my apartment felt like a stranger's home. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow deeper. I left every light on, but the glow only sharpened my fear. I couldn't sit still. I paced from window to door, checking locks, peering out into the street. The black car wasn't there anymore. That somehow made it worse. By 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. The USB drive felt heavy in my hand as I plugged it in. Rows of numbers lit the screen, familiar yet newly sinister. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. Payments disguised as vendor fees. Marion's warning echoed. This company isn't just hiding theft, it's built on it. And Rachel's voice, they're funding something bigger. I started digging again. This time I focused on Whitaker Holdings. Layer by layer, I peeled back the shell companies. Most were impenetrable, but one had left a breadcrumb, a charity donation recorded in a minor tax filing. That donation led to another entity, which led to another. By dawn, I had a chain. Offshore funds routed through Whitaker Holdings, then funneled into a foundation with an innocuous name, the Cashin Group. I searched it. Nothing public, but an archived article from a small trade newsletter mentioned the Cashin Group sponsoring strategic development initiatives in Eastern Europe. The phrasing was vague, but one detail stopped me cold, a partnership liaison listed as Catherine Walsh. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. Catherine, my ally. The one who had guided me, warned me, encouraged me to fight. Her name was there, tied directly to the group funded by stolen money. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Had she been using me all along? I scrolled further. The article listed Cashin, key consultants. Another name, Thomas Whitaker. I slammed the laptop shut, everything spun. Catherine had offered me a job at Horizon Financial. She told me to gather evidence. She coached me on timing. She'd put me directly in conflict with the company, and now her name appeared alongside Whitaker's in the same shadow network. I sat very still, breathing hard. If this was true, then the fight I thought I was waging wasn't between me and the company. It was between two factions of the same machine, and I was the weapon. At 9, I went to work as usual. The building's glass doors reflected my pale face, fractured by the morning sun. Inside, the atmosphere was quieter than ever. Eyes darted away as I walked past. Daniel wasn't at his desk. Kyle avoided me entirely. Vanessa's door stayed shut. I went straight to my office and closed the door. My hands shook as I opened my laptop again, confirming what I'd found. Catherine's name, Whitaker's name, the Cashin Group. My phone buzzed. A message from Catherine, dinner tonight. Urgent. I stared at the words, my throat dry. Had she realized I'd found her name, or was she going to tell me herself? At noon, Garrett called me in. His expression was cool, his voice measured. You've been distracted, he said. I've been working, I replied. On what? Cleaning up other people's messes. His jaw tightened. Sign the agreement, Alois, it's your last chance. I met his eyes steadily. You keep saying that. He leaned forward. Do you know how many people have stood where you're standing? Yes, I said, and I know what happened to them. His face went pale for a second before the mask returned. Then you know what's at stake. I do. I left his office without waiting for dismissal. Back at my desk, I opened the USB one more time. The log glowed back at me, rows of numbers now more than theft, they were a map of power. A power Catherine and Whitaker shared. My phone buzzed again. Catherine, we need to talk. In person. I typed back. Where? She replied instantly, the old Harrington building. 8 p.m., the same building where Oliver had once worked. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "I'll be there." But even as I sent it, my mind raced. Was this a meeting, a confession, or a trap? That night, I left my apartment with the USB hidden in my coat. The city glowed cold and metallic under streetlights. I walked quickly, every shadow a threat. The old Harrington building loomed at the end of the street, its windows dark, its facade cracked. It had been vacant for years. I slipped inside through a side door, the air damp and musty. Catherine was waiting in the center of the empty lobby, her coat buttoned tight, her hair pulled back. "You came," she said softly. "I found your name," I replied. She flinched, then sighed. "I wondered when you would." "Why?" I demanded. "Why bring me into this? Why use me?" "I didn't use you," she said, her voice sharp. "I tried to protect you, but you wouldn't stop, and now you're too deep." "You're with them," I accused. "I was with them," she snapped. "Until I realized what they were doing. Until I left. But you don't leave people like Whitaker, you just run." Her eyes were fierce. "I thought if I helped you expose it from the inside, maybe we could finally burn it down, but you're not ready." "I'm ready," I said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then listen carefully. The Cashin Group isn't just a slush fund, it's a network. Money laundering, political influence, covert funding. Whitaker runs the legal front, Garrett runs the corporate funnel, and me, I was their recruiter until I tried to leave." My stomach turned. "They'll come for you," she whispered. "They already are." "You have to disappear before?" Footsteps echoed in the lobby. Catherine froze. "They found us," she hissed. She shoved a folded document into my hand. "Take this. Run, don't trust anyone." Before I could respond, figures emerged from the shadows, suits, sunglasses, silent. Catherine turned toward them, her face hard. I ran. The sound of footsteps behind me echoed through the dark hallways as I sprinted for the exit, the document clutched in my hand, my heart pounding. I burst out into the night, the cold air burning my lungs. I didn't stop running until the building was blocks behind me. Only then did I look at the paper in my hand. A bank transfer sheet, offshore accounts. And a name at the top, not Whitaker, not Garrett. Vanessa Chen. My breath caught. Everything I thought I knew had just shifted again. The name glared back at me from the paper, black ink seared into my vision, Vanessa Chen. For weeks, she had played the role of watchful guardian. Stern, controlling, reminding me of loyalty. She had stood at Garrett's side, silent but powerful. I thought she was his enforcer, his second in command, but she wasn't following orders. She was giving them. I staggered down the empty street, the paper crumpled in my hand, the night air sharp in my lungs. Vanessa was the one. She had orchestrated the erasures, managed the offshore channels, hidden behind Garrett's shadow while pulling the strings herself. And I had walked into her office every day, blind. I shoved the paper deep into my coat and kept moving, scanning every passing car, every window. I didn't go home. I couldn't. They had already been inside once. Instead, I rode the subway until dawn, switching trains, watching reflections in the glass. By sunrise, I found myself in a cafe across the city, the kind of place no one from Horizon would bother with. I spread the document on the table, my hands trembling. The transfer wasn't small. Tens of millions routed through Whitaker Holdings, into the Cashin Group, then into a personal account flagged under Vanessa's name. The note read simply, "Strategic allocation." It was her handwriting in the margin. Proof. I opened my laptop, hands shaking as I photographed the document, encrypted the image, and sent it to both of Catherine's anonymous inboxes. Redundancy. Backup. Then I sat back, my coffee untouched, the exhaustion finally breaking through. I wasn't fighting Garrett. I wasn't fighting Whitaker. I was fighting Vanessa. And Vanessa was the kind of enemy who smiled at you as she sharpened the knife. By noon, the office felt different, tighter, quieter. The usual buzz was gone, replaced by something heavier. I could feel it in the air like a storm pressing against the windows. Vanessa's door was open. She sat at her desk, calm, collected, her eyes flicking to me as I passed. She smiled faintly. "Busy morning, Alois?" I forced my face blank. "Just another day." Her smile deepened. "Good, routine is important." The words crawled over me. She knew, she always knew. At my desk, Daniel appeared, pale and sweating. "They're moving fast," he whispered. "What do you mean?" "They called an emergency board session this afternoon. Closed doors, you're not on the list." My throat tightened. "What are they planning?" He looked at me with hollow eyes. "They're going to erase you." I spent the afternoon in my office with the blinds shut, staring at the USB drive in my hand. It felt heavier than ever. Inside it was the log, the resignations, the pattern. Now I had the document pointing to Vanessa, but evidence was useless if no one ever saw it. By 6, the boardroom lights were still on. Through the glass wall, I could see shadows moving, Vanessa at the head of the table, Garrett beside her. Whitaker leaned back in his chair like a silent kingmaker. They weren't discussing strategy. They were deciding my fate. I left quietly, walking into the cold night, the city buzzing around me. My reflection stared back from every window, pale, tight, exhausted. I thought of Oliver, of Rachel, of all the names erased from the archives. If I disappeared now, I'd just be another file marked personal reasons. I couldn't let that happen. I didn't go home. Instead, I went to Catherine. She opened the door cautiously, eyes scanning the street before letting me inside. The apartment was dark, blinds drawn tight. "You shouldn't be here," she said. I held up the paper. "Vanessa Chen, it's her." Catherine's face twisted, not with surprise but recognition. "I told you, it goes deeper than you think. She's running it." "She's one of them," Catherine corrected. "But yes, she's the one you've been sitting across from all along." I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. "I thought it was Garrett, I thought it was Whitaker, but it's her." Catherine's voice softened. "Garrett is her shield. Whitaker is her fixer. Vanessa is the architect." My breath shook. "Then how do I stop her?" Catherine hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. "You don't stop her, you survive her, but if you want to fight, this is where you start." Inside the folder was a single page, a contact, a journalist, not mainstream, underground, the kind of person who lived in shadows where corporations couldn't easily reach. "She'll believe you," Catherine said, "but you only get one chance." That night I walked home with the folder clutched tight, the city feeling sharper, more dangerous. Every car, every passerby, every reflection felt like a threat. At my apartment door I froze, the lock was broken. Inside the place was wrecked, papers scattered, drawers overturned, my laptop smashed on the floor. The USB drive was gone. I staggered forward, my chest tightening. They had been here. They had taken everything. No, not everything. The document, still in my coat pocket. Vanessa hadn't won. Not yet. I sat in the wreckage of my living room, the city humming outside, the paper clutched in my fist. Tomorrow I would contact the journalist. Tomorrow I would make my move. But tonight I finally understood the truth. I wasn't exposing corruption in a company. I was at war with Vanessa Chen, and she wasn't going to let me walk away alive. The wreckage of my apartment smelled of dust and betrayal. Papers torn, drawers overturned, glass glittering on the floor like broken stars. My laptop was destroyed, my files gone, the USB stolen. But the one thing that mattered most was still in my coat pocket. Vanessa's name. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, staring at the shadows in every corner, clutching the folded paper like a talisman. By morning, the decision was made. I couldn't fight her alone anymore. I had to go outside the walls. Catherine's folder had a name, Margaret Lane, independent journalist, former investigative reporter now running a small, encrypted publication exposing corporate crimes. At noon, I found a pay phone, the kind no one used anymore, tucked in the corner of a forgotten subway station. I dialed the number scrawled in Catherine's file. 3 rings, then a voice low and wary. "Yes." "I need to meet," I said, my voice cracked. "It's about Horizon Financial. It's about Vanessa Chen." The silence on the other end was heavy. Then, "East Terminal, midnight, come alone, leave your phone behind." The line clicked dead. I stood there for a long time, the receiver cold against my ear. Then I walked back into the noise of the city, my pulse steady. It was decided. The rest of the day at the office felt like walking through a minefield. Conversations silenced when I entered. Garrett's door closed with a thud as I passed. Vanessa's smile lingered like a knife at my throat. She knew. She always knew. At 5, she called me in. Her office gleamed, cold and perfect. She gestured for me to sit. "Eloise," she said smoothly, "we've come to a decision." I sat, my face calm. "About what?" "Your role here, your future." I forced myself not to look at the drawer where I imagined she kept the unsigned resignation forms. "What future?" I asked softly. Her smile sharpened. "One you control, or one we control. It depends on whether you sign." The folder slid across the desk. The same agreement. The same trap. I didn't touch it. "Do you really believe you can fight us?" she asked, her voice almost gentle. "Do you know how many have tried?" "I know how many disappeared," I said. For a moment the mask slipped, just a flicker of irritation in her eyes, then it was gone. "Think carefully, Eloise," she said. "You have until morning." I left without a word. At midnight, East Terminal was nearly empty. The echo of my footsteps bounced off the tiled walls. Margaret Lane was waiting near a shuttered newsstand, a dark coat wrapped tight, her hair streaked with silver. She looked me over once, sharp and assessing. "You're Eloise." "Yes." "Show me." I pulled out the folded paper. Her eyes scanned it quickly, then flicked up to mine. "This is real," she murmured. It's everything, I whispered. It proves Vanessa Chen is running it. Offshore accounts, shell companies, the Cashin Group. I had more files, logs, but they broke into my home. They took it all. Margit's face tightened. Then we move fast. Once I publish this, they'll come harder than ever. I don't care, I said. My voice shook, but my resolve didn't. As long as the truth gets out. She studied me, then nodded once. All right, we go tomorrow. When I returned to my apartment, the door was open. The chair I had wedged beneath the handle lay broken on the floor. I froze. Inside, a figure sat in the dark. Vanessa. Her silhouette was sharp against the dim streetlight leaking through the blinds. Calm, waiting, I didn't move, my breath caught. She spoke softly, almost kindly. You think you found something, Alois, but you've only found enough to get yourself hurt. I swallowed hard. You broke into my home, you stole my files. Her head tilted slightly. Correction, I protected the company's assets, and I gave you the chance to walk away, yet here you are still digging. She stood slowly, each movement deliberate. This is your final warning. Sign the agreement, take the settlement, leave. Or you'll end like Oliver, like Rachel, like all the rest. I forced my voice steady. You can erase me, but you can't erase this. Her eyes narrowed. What did you do? I didn't answer. For the first time, her mask cracked, her voice sharpened. Who did you give it to? I said nothing. Her hand tightened on the back of the chair. For a moment, I thought she would strike. But then she smiled again, cold and precise. You've made your choice, she said. So have I. She walked past me, calm as ever, and slipped out the door. I locked it behind her with shaking hands. Sleep didn't come, only the echo of her voice. So have I. The next morning, the office buzzed with whispers. Something was happening, something big. At 10 a.m., Garrett called an all-hands meeting. The auditorium filled, every seat occupied, the air charged with tension. Garrett stood at the podium, Vanessa at his side, Whitaker behind them. My friends, Garrett said, his voice smooth, we are entering a new chapter. Horizon Financial will expand its global reach. We will secure our future. Vanessa stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the room. And that future depends on loyalty. Those who stand with us will prosper. Those who don't, she let the words hang. The room was silent. Fear pressed down like a weight. I sat in the middle row, the paper heavy in my bag. I felt the eyes of the room on me, some pitying, some fearful, some accusing. I didn't move, but inside I knew. By tonight, the truth would break. And when it did, either I would fall with it or I would finally bring Vanessa down. The auditorium emptied in silence, employees filing out with bowed heads, fear etched into every movement. Garrett smiled from the podium, Vanessa at his side, radiating control. I slipped out with the rest, my bag heavy with the folded transfer sheet, though its power no longer rested in my hands. Margit had it now. By tonight, the world would see Vanessa's name tied to offshore accounts, the Cashin Group, and the erasures. But the hours between now and then felt endless and dangerous. At noon, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I stepped into the stairwell to answer. Margit's voice was tense. I've verified the document. It's authentic. I've cross-checked with 2 sources. This is going live tonight. Relief flooded me. So it's real. It's finally happening. Yes, she said. But Alois, they know. My sources say Vanessa called in favors already. If she realizes you're my link, she won't wait. You need to disappear before this publishes. I closed my eyes. I won't run. Then prepare yourself, Margit said, because when this drops, there's no turning back. The line went dead. When I returned to my desk, Daniel was waiting. His face was ashen. They know, he whispered. Know what? That you're the leak. Vanessa's furious. Garrett's playing calm, but Alois, they're not letting you walk out tonight. My heart thudded. How do you know? Because I heard it. I was outside the boardroom. Vanessa said your name. I stared at him. He looked broken, terrified, sweat shining on his brow. You have to leave now, he urged. While you still can. I shook my head. If I leave, they'll say I ran, they'll say I was guilty. They'll erase you either way, he said, his voice cracking. Don't you understand? That's what they do. I leaned closer, my voice low. Then help me stop them. For the first time, Daniel didn't look away. His lips trembled, but he gave the faintest nod. By 5 o'clock, the building's atmosphere had shifted. Security guards lingered on every floor. Doors locked behind me with heavy clicks. My badge flickered red where it once flashed green. The trap was tightening. I made my way to the 23rd floor, where the board offices glowed behind frosted glass. My hands shook, but I forced my stride steady. Vanessa's door was open. She stood behind her desk, her expression calm, almost serene. Alois, she said, come in. I stepped inside. The door shut behind me with a soft click. You've been busy, she said. I said nothing. Margit Lane, she continued, her tone light. You thought I wouldn't find out. She's reckless, idealistic. She'll publish anything if it makes her feel righteous. My stomach turned. You don't get to control everything. Her eyes gleamed. I already do. She walked around the desk, standing close enough that I could smell her perfume, sharp and clean. You could still walk away, Alois, she said softly. Sign the agreement, take the money, disappear on your own terms. No one has to know you tried. My voice was steady. Everyone will know by tonight. For the first time, her smile faltered. What did you do? She asked, her tone sharper. I met her gaze. I gave it to someone you can't reach. The mask slipped. Her eyes burned. You think one document will bring me down? She hissed. I have judges, senators, half the media in my pocket. Horizon isn't just a company, it's a fortress, and you're nothing but a crack in the wall. I leaned closer. Cracks spread. For a long moment, silence hung between us, electric and sharp. Then she straightened, her mask returning. You won't make it out of this building tonight, she said quietly, but thank you for entertaining me. She turned away, dismissing me. I walked out without looking back. At 7 p.m., the story broke. I was sitting in a cafe blocks from the office, Daniel across from me, both of us hunched over my phone. Margit's article blazed across the screen. Vanessa Chen exposed, offshore fraud, corporate erasures, and the Cashin Group. The document glared in the headline photo. Vanessa's name circled in red. The article spread fast. Within minutes, social media ignited. Within an hour, mainstream outlets picked it up. By 9, Vanessa's name was everywhere. Daniel sat pale and trembling. It's done, he whispered. But even as he spoke, I knew it wasn't over. The cafe door opened. 2 men in suits stepped inside, scanning the room. Daniel's hand tightened on mine. They're here. I shoved the phone into my pocket, grabbed my bag, and pulled him toward the back exit. We ran into the night, the city alive with sirens and screens flashing Vanessa's name. By midnight, chaos had erupted. The board issued a statement denying everything. Garrett looked pale and frantic on live television. Whitaker had vanished entirely. But Vanessa, she remained calm. She stood on the steps of Horizon's glass tower, flanked by security, delivering a statement with perfect poise. These allegations are false, she said. Fabricated by a disgruntled employee, Horizon remains strong. Her eyes flicked directly to the camera, sharp and steady. To me, a warning, a promise. I watched from a rooftop blocks away, the city lights sprawling beneath me, my breath sharp in the cold night. I had survived. For now, the truth was out. The cracks were spreading, but Vanessa Chen was still standing. And I knew this wasn't over. Not until one of us fell. It had been 3 days since the story broke. I hadn't gone back to the office. I doubted I ever would. Horizon Financial was a glass tower with cracks spreading faster than anyone could patch them. Garrett was clinging to denial, Whitaker was gone, and Vanessa was still standing tall, as if headlines were just background noise. But the city had changed. Everywhere I went, I saw her name. News screens flashing, newspapers on street corners, conversations in cafes. For once, people were looking. I stayed in the shadows, hotels under other names. Cash only. A bag with nothing more than clothes, my passport, and the document Margit hadn't yet published, proof of 3 more accounts, still hidden, still waiting. The journalist's words echoed. They'll come harder now, you have to disappear, maybe I should have. Maybe that would have been the smart choice, but I couldn't. Because when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who had once begged for a fair salary. I saw someone else. Someone who had walked through fire and refused to be erased. And someone who still had work to do. On the 4th night, I stood on the same rooftop where I had watched Vanessa deny everything. The city lights burned beneath me, cold and endless. I pulled out my phone and opened a secure line Catherine had given me. The cursor blinked, waiting. I typed, "Round 1 is over. Round 2 begins soon." I hit send. The city hummed. The cracks spread, and I was still here, not erased, not yet.